Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited because today's guest is Tracey Brown, and she has a new book called Rescue to Recovery, a veteran's story of hidden scars and personal discovery. And so today, Tracey and I will have a great conversation about what exactly does that mean. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about Tracey Brown. Tracey is a U.S. Coast Guard veteran. She was a rescue swimmer on both small boats and helicopters, a firefighter, navigator, and heavy weather surf coxswain, among other titles in the early 80s, even before understanding the extent of how the characteristics of PTSD had affected her personal life. Tracey was educated as a director of rehabilitation and has been working for more than 20 years in the field. And the last decade has been dedicated to specialized work in pain reduction through scar tissue therapy. This is where she began her journey to reconnect her life after the lost years of dealing with PTSD. Her hope is to help the helpers, heroes, and warriors to go beyond the stigma of PTSD. So, wow, Tracey, I got chills just reading your bio and feeling that the scars, you know, it's almost like, in the work you do today with scar tissue therapy, and then the PTSD, which is emotional scarring, it just makes me really want to know what your book's all about. So I'll let you kind of give us an overview about why you wrote this book.
Well, thank you, Tammy. I really appreciate you having me on. It was a long time of discovery. I actually went over 30 years undiagnosed with PTSD. So I was in the Coast Guard way back in the days when it wasn't really fashionable for women to be in the military. I went in 1983. And so that kind of sets the stage as to an uphill battle in and of itself. But when it came to the recovery part of things, I started, once I got out, I was an EMT in the Coast Guard. So the medical field has always been something that's been pretty fascinating to me anyway. Just from early scars as a kid, physical scars. But when I started doing scar tissue therapy, one of the characteristics of scar tissues, when you look it up in medical journals, scar tissue is confused tissue. So whether it's from a blunt force trauma, something that immediately happened, or if it's from overuse, doing a repetitive motion, that's called overuse syndrome. It creates a confusion in the tissue. So normal tissue and fibers like muscles, ligaments, tendons, they should be running, sliding right against each other. Like if you had a bunch of rubber bands lined up together and they just move nice and easy together. Scar tissue is confused. They knot up. And, you might have noticed if you get I've got a knot in my shoulder, or, something like that. That's a trigger point. And that's the beginning of scar tissue. It's starting to get confused. And as I was working on patients with their physical issues, all the things that I was saying to them as far as, you've got to work this out. You've got to really kind of pay attention to this. You've got to treat this. The whole time I had no idea, and that they have a lot of power in it by doing their own work, by participating in the work. It really started to make my thoughts about, the craziness that I thought was going on in my head, the ways that I was reacting to situations that was different to other people. I was realizing that my mind and my emotions were pretty confused. And it lined up like scar tissue, physical scar tissue. It was confused tissue. And as the years went on, I started realizing, wow, all I need to do is really find a way or find somebody to help me reorganize my thoughts around these scars. And that's really what therapy is all about. It's really, I started going to some very specific therapy for trauma and post-traumatic trauma, because that's a little different. But they helped me reorganize my thoughts through definitions, through understanding that you're not alone, through understanding that you're not crazy, these different understandings, and layer by layer kind of peeling back the wounds. Well, I do the same thing in the physical scar tissue world too. We're just going through layers and layers and layers of old scar tissue to where we can get to the point where everything's reorganized and there's freedom of movement and freedom from pain. And that's really where I connected those dots. It was, wow, it's like this works the same way. A lot of people you talk to, you don't separate the emotional from the pisical, because our emotions tend to settle in our body anyway. And we hold on to them until we let them go. So that was really a big eye-opener for me on the connection, how those two are connected.
So this is a lifetime in the making. You mentioned that you had, I guess, physical scars from childhood, but then your life as a rescuer, or
yes,
is, where would you say that the PTSD came into your life? Was it from the type of work you were doing back in the 80s or from childhood?
Well, I think it's, traumas tend to build on each other. That's another thing that I learned. So, I did have a childhood trauma where I was burned pretty badly. I was very fortunate to have, my mom was amazing through that whole process. I had some really great doctors that helped through that, not only physical, but psychological. But the Coast Guard, I was, as a rescue swimmer back in the 80s, your response time on small boats was nothing like helicopters, still isn't. Helicopters are much faster at getting to the scene. And so as a rescue swimmer on boats, the double entendre of the title, rescue to recovery, is we would get so amped up, if you will, as far as adrenaline, to go out and rescue somebody. You'd go through your contingencies. This is what we're going to do. If we come up on this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to affect this rescue. And the whole time you're in your mindset, you're ready to rescue somebody and save someone. 9 times out of 10, we'd end up going in that mindset and getting there too late and picking up rescue, basically recovering a body. And that kind of emotional toll, that's kind of like the repetitive motion. It's something that happens over and over and over, and it really wears on your soul. It wears on the psyche. And so the book is really some stories of things that actually happened when I was in the Coast Guard, some of the lessons that I learned from it, and really hope that no matter what you've gone through, and it's not just for veterans. I mean, especially in the times that we're in right now, a lot of people are going through these repetitive traumas. We can't do that. No, we can't do that. Or just being alone by themselves in quarantine. There's a lot of traumas out there that, you can't compare one trauma to another. It's how you're being affected by it yourself. So I'm hoping that some of these stories and some of the lessons that I learned along the way will help others to realize that, there's not this great stigma to ask for help if you've got an issue in your emotions. There's such a stigma around even now, even as we talk about PTS a lot, the media and stuff, there's still the stigma saying, I don't know if I need help. And it's very difficult for, especially military or leaders or, first responders. It's difficult for them to ask for help, partially because of the stigma they have, or I had, I should say. And I'm going to be marginalized, or I'm going to be sidelined. I won't be able to do the thing that I love to do because I'm broken somehow, or I'm so lost I won't be found. And I'm, that's what I thought for years. I thought I'm just a hopeless case. I'm just a lost case. Nobody will understand what's going through my head. But that's not true. There's a lot of people that really do understand, but they don't know unless we ask. They don't know unless we talk. And our stories really matter. Everybody's stories matter. whether it's a rescuer or first responder, somebody that's at a grocery store working right now, they're scared, and those kind of things add up in the psyche, and they really take their toll, and we really need to talk about it and tell our stories.
I think you're really right about that, because as you were talking, I was thinking about those people at the grocery store, the checkout guy or girl, the bagger, the person whose job now is to wipe and sanitize the carts.
Yeah.
Like a new job position, and everybody's wearing the mask. And the part about the masks for me is it's hard to breathe, and you can tell that you're not getting all your oxygen, because you'll be standing there and you're kind of a little bit of confusion starts to happen. And you realize it's because you're just like covered up, and all you can cover are the eyes. And all of these people who were in these kind of invisible jobs are now very visible, because they are the front lines.
And they didn't sign up for it.
They didn't sign up for it, and they're certainly not being paid your duty pay for being out there. So do you have a story that you could share with us, that a little, one of the stories, and maybe what lesson that particular story helped you, or what it uncovered for you in this personal discovery?
That's there's a couple of stories in there. One of them was that for years, like I said, once I got out of the Coast Guard, I knew that I was different than I was when I went in. Different meaning I wasn't quite as happy-go-lucky. I there seemed to be like this cloud. There's like a heaviness, a constant heaviness over me. And so for many, many years, I would try to find books or anything to I read hundreds of books on, self-help, happiness, how to find your happiness, how to find joy, those kind of things, and rather than asking for help, because it wasn't in me to, I'm a rescuer. My mom taught me all my life that I can do anything. If I put my mind to it, I can do anything. And this was one thing that I could not, no matter how many years, no matter how many books, no matter how much research or study I did, I couldn't figure this out. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And that kind of cycles itself. So I had this great foundation of I can do anything. However, emotional scarring and emotional, insults is what they call it in the medical field. Having these insults constantly really can change your emotional fortitude. And so I call it distractions. One of the stories that I tell in the book is how in the 80s, there was a lot of drug running in a lot of the ports. And the Coast Guard, one of our duties was to do drug interdiction. And we knew that coming in through the Golden Gate Bridge, that was one of the big main thoroughfares where they're going to come through. Well, a lot of times there were certain distractions that would happen that could take all the resources of the bay to a different area so boats could come in. So we were kind of aware of that, but we always had to respond to every call. So we had a call of a guy that was jumping off the Oakland Bay Bridge. And if you know anything about the geography of the area, the Golden Gate Bridge is probably the northwestern part of the peninsula. The Oakland Bay Bridge on the Berkeley side is way east and south. So what they did is somebody called in a jumper, and there's a guy that was on the bridge that was pretending to be a jumper. We didn't know this. We thought he was a jumper. So all the resources, Coast Guard, sheriff, police, fire, everybody goes over there. And, you have to be there until the person either jumps, hopefully not, or on the bridge, the police, fire, and all those guys can get the guy off the bridge. So, we were there for hours. And I can remember all of us on the boats, because we're doing drug interdiction all the time. We're like, this is not the issue. There's something else going on, And that was a light bulb for me, reflecting back on these stories that I'm telling, that, all the things that I'm trying to fix on the surface here, that I'm not asking for help. That's not the issue. I'm being distracted every time I feel this need to have some sort of counseling. I was afraid to ask for help, or I was ashamed to ask for help. So instead of asking for help and actually going directly to the source, I would distract myself in a sense and go read another book or do a webinar in solitude. And we're good at it. We're good at distracting ourselves because we're busy people, we've got to survive. And I didn't have anybody else to rely on. So I always had to rely on myself. So I'm always trying to pull myself out of a hole that I'm getting into emotionally rather than just asking for help. So I was always getting distracted.
I think that's really interesting when you say that, because that is a really good example. It's like, let's have this guy at the farthest point something. And if you look at our world today, we're constantly. There's something going on that we should be paying attention to, but they're talking about something else on the news. Yeah. And so everybody's looking over here, and meanwhile they pass bills and do things.
Exactly.
Nobody even knows, and then all of a sudden they go, when did that happen?
When did it happen? Exactly. Well, I was distracted over here. Yeah. Same thing goes in our emotions. We can, especially now these days, a lot of people, we're just, people are sitting at home. They're at home more. And it's really an amazing thing to go, okay, well, I'm by myself. And you get a lot of things going on in your head, and it's just like, oh, you know what? I think I should just go over here and do this, because it's hard to do the work.
Right.
Even in my physical business, it's like, this is going to hurt a little bit, but we need to do this to get past it.
Right. It's like the pain, because you have, like you said, with scar tissue, it's all knotted up.
Yeah.
And you have to go through all those knots and untangle the knots in order to get back. It's like when you have a necklace or something and it's all in a knot. And people like me, when that happens, I go, oops, and I give up.
Yeah, because it's a lot of work to untangle it.
I imagine that's what happens to us with our emotions too. It's such a big knotted mess that it's like, I'm going to go on to something else, or maybe that's why people get divorces too. That's a big knotted mess. I don't want that. Let's go try a new one until we knot that one up.
Yeah. So, well, then I thought for myself, I'm gonna, this is too much. If I dive into this stuff, I'll never be able to function. I just didn't think I'd be able to function in society again, because I thought it was such a tangled mess. And it's interesting. I use a tool in my physical physiotherapy practice, and it basically it uses a high frequency vibration to reorganize the soft tissue. So it's not even nearly as painful as it used to be when you did manual work. Now it's just using a vibration, a gentle vibration, to really just kind of vibrate those things and to reorganize the tissue. And it just started making me think, it's like, it's not that hard. It's not that. The hardest part is getting over the shame of asking for help. The hardest part is finding somebody that you trust to talk to. And, I tell people, it's just find a friend that you really trust, and at least tell your story to them. If you can tell your story to one person, you can start the process of healing.
So right there, I think, is a really good piece of advice for our listeners who need that help. And it doesn't even have to be a heavy duty trauma like what you experienced. It can just be life.
Yeah.
We're trying to deal with. And sometimes we don't realize that our traumas, even though they might not seem to be big, but for us in our lives, they were big for us.
Exactly. And that's all that matters.
And you can't compare your trauma to somebody else's.
You cannot. No, you cannot.
Because everything that you're talking about just really makes a lot of sense. So in the work that you do now, you do the physical work on scars. Yes. And your book, when you work with people, do you just work with them on their physical scars now? Or do you also talk to them about their emotional scars?
Well, it's very interesting, because if you know anybody that's in the healing arts, if they're doing any kind of body work, you're going to talk about what's going on emotionally. Because, and I tell people, because years and years ago, before I was doing scar tissue therapy, I was also a massage therapist. So you'll know that when you're working on, I'll work on somebody's, shoulder blades, underneath their shoulder blades, the rhomboids, and you start working on that, right? And you start working on that, and inevitably they will tell you exactly where that came from. It's like I start working on, it's like, oh, my job, this and that, and this and that, or my kids, or whatever it is, they're going to tell me exactly where that knot came from, where that tension came from, because the body stores it. That's why, there's a lot of disease that we deal with these days, but the number one feeder of disease is stress. Stress, sugar, those are pretty commonalities when it comes to cancers and major diseases. Is, you might have something, but you add the stress on top of it and it magnifies it. So people will always talk about where their physical pains have come from. They almost always do. So they go hand in hand. So when I'm working on somebody, inevitably we're going to be talking. And, I don't call it's not like I do emotional therapy, but it's part of their healing is just talking about it. And so I'm just there to listen, maybe guide them a little bit, give them some ideas to maybe, if you did this, maybe that would help that. And, I'm a physiotherapist. Anatomy makes a lot of sense to me. The mind, has been an amazing process for me for the last 30 plus years.
So right now, where will your book be available? I know that it's not out quite yet, but by the time this airs, it probably will be fully available. Where can people get your book?
My book will be on Amazon. I'm going to be providing a link as soon as I get it to anybody and everybody that likes it. I'll get it to you so you can get it out to whomever you'd like. But it'll be on Amazon, Rescue to Recovery, with my name. And then also I will probably have a link on my website, which is www.rescuetorecovery.com. And I'll put the link for the book there.
rescuetorecovery.com. So After this book, are you planning on writing any more?
Yeah, I believe so. It's funny. Once you start writing, it's almost like you can't stop. I tell people I've got at least 2 more books in me. One is definitely going to be about my early burns, when I got burned when I was younger, about that journey. And then I'd like to do a children's book. I think it would be really helpful. This book here, it was really my niece, who is an amazing illustrator. My niece actually did all the illustrations in the book, which I'm really proud of her. She's pretty amazing. Her name is Ashlyn Smith, and she's a great artist. And so hopefully she and I are going to collaborate on a children's book and have her do the illustrations as well. But those will probably be coming in the next year. Because, like I said, once you start writing, you can't really stop.
So has the current COVID-19 situation made it so that you've had to change how you work with people a little bit?
Actually, I work with a doctor, so we are considered essential. So we have been working, although it has dipped quite a bit, just understandably. I do I help people there's a lot of exercises and stretches that you can do. So I actually do a Zoom sessions with people to show them, because 90% of the, maybe not quite 90%, but there's a very large percentage of the reasons why we have a lot of the pains we have. And a lot of it is postural. Yeah. So I teach a lot of stretching, a lot of movements to actually counteract what we're doing in our life. Everything we do is shutting ourselves down. We're protecting ourselves more because of COVID. So our ears, our shoulders get up in our ears. So I teach a lot of those things, and I do the sessions over Skype or Zoom to help people change that. And like I say in my practice, you have a lot of power. I see people maybe a half hour to an hour a week. There are 100 more hours that you can do something for yourself to help if you just know what to do. And that's what I do, is I give them people what to do.
Oh, that's really cool. So
yeah.
somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to if they want to deal with the physical therapy or physiotherapy, my website, www.tnt, like dynamite, tntpaintherapy.com. They can actually reach out to me there, or they can send an email at info@rescue to recovery, and I'll get that.
Okay, well, rescue to recovery is an easy for me.
Yeah.
Easy.
They can send an email to the info@rescuetorecovery.com, and I'll get that.
Okay, so before I let you go, of all of the things that you've learned on your rescue to recovery journey, what would you say that is? What's the most important thing that you've learned?
The most important thing I would have to say is to be willing to talk to somebody. I'm telling you, there's nothing more powerful than sitting across from somebody and them saying you're going to be okay, or I understand, or let me give you a hug, there's nothing more powerful than having the human interaction, because and I describe it like when you have a dream, it makes perfect sense in your head. Everything that's going on, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I'm flying around and now I turn purple and I'm underwater. I mean, dreams make sense in your head, but the minute you start talking about it, it's like, that makes absolutely no sense. Well, when we have pains and when we have traumas, it all gets caught up in your head, and it doesn't make sense there, because it's all confused. But the minute we start speaking it, we can actually kind of, the way I'd say it, it's like, I'm just going to lay it out on the table and we can just sort it out from here, but I can't sort it out until I lay it out. And that's really what speaking it is. It helps us to kind of reorganize some of those confused thoughts. It really helps us to reorganize, and having somebody there to say, you think that you're unworthy, or you think that you're, that there's so much shame, but there's not. You're having a very normal reaction. Stress after a trauma is a normal reaction. And it took me a long time to understand that. I thought I was broken. I thought I was so broken that I was reacting improperly, because there's this disorder behind PTS, and it's not. It's a very normal reaction. It's when it's chronic, when you don't talk about it, when you don't address it, then real problems, real heartache, real isolation, real, issues come up, because you're not expressing, you're not talking. So my number one thing is just find one person, if you can, talk to them and just say, look, I don't know what I'm going through, or I need help or something, but be willing to reach out to somebody, because it will change your life.
Wow. So talk. Tell your story.
Tell your story.
Somebody to listen, and then find the professional who can help you. Or if you can't do that, talk to somebody and just start talking it out. I think that just makes so much sense. And especially for people today, like a lot of us I'd say we are traumatized, because our lives have been turned upside down, and we're not used to the fact that you can't go out, just go to the store or out in public and without, somebody judging you about, oh, you're wearing a mask, you're not.
Or not wearing a mask. Exactly.
All the different things. And on Facebook, of course, you get bombarded, with the social media. And then, of course, we don't know what's real and what's not, because our news is just so convoluted. So, Tracey Brown, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I've really learned a lot, and I think what you just said is tell your story and check yourself for distractions. Are you distracting away from what is really bothering you? And it's okay. I think that what I really got from you, Tracey, is that it's okay. You are normal when you have a reaction to stress and trauma, because it's the way our bodies are processing, and our mind and bodies are connected.
Yes.
And ask for help. I think that's the big thing. Ask for help, because you aren't alone. There are people out there who really do care, and we all need to know. So I'm really glad that you came on the show today and helped me. Now, I understand that you also work with Tam Luke on some of her projects. Why do you like working with Tam Luke on her different projects?
Oh my goodness. Tam and I go back about 10 years, maybe a little bit more. And when we first met, it was instant. Oh, you're an amazing, I just, we have this fun little thing. It's just like, I just love me some Tam, and, and she's amazing. And I had always known that somewhere, somehow, some way I was going to write a book. I didn't know what the book was going to be. I just knew that it was in me. And she'll tell you that the book is in you. It just needs to come out. You just need to let it come out. Kind of like our traumas, they need to come out. And so she was so instrumental in helping me to organize my thoughts around this. Because, again, going back to that confusion, when I met her, I was still undiagnosed with PTSD. And I just knew that there was a lot of confusion. It was very difficult to focus, kind of very ADD kind of stuff, and distractions, the whole bit. And, when she started doing all her coaching as a writing coach, I'm like, I'm in. I trust her with everything in me. She is so kind. She is so caring. She is so dedicated to those people she works with. She's just an absolute dream to work with. And I'm so thankful. And so, yeah, when she was starting to coach with writing, I'm like, I'm in. I need help. So you gotta be willing to ask, that's kind of life. We can't do this alone. We really can't. Anything. We can't deal with our traumas alone. We're not meant to be alone. We're relational beings. As a human being, we're called to relation. And I'm very thankful for Tam. She's made this whole process really doable.
Well, that's really super. And I had the same reaction when I met Tam Luke also, that there was instant connection. So everyone, we have been speaking with author Tracey Brown. And again, it is Rescue to Recovery, a veteran story of hidden scars and personal discovery. Tracey Brown, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you.
Everyone, this is Tammy Pantzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.